righty. So let's go back to here. Let's put this on. Bingo. And we are live. Hello, young people, old people, people like me who are virtually ageless, all of you out there. It's good to see you. I'm Tad. It is 1 o'clock in the morning here in California, and I'm about to start reading. But first, I'm going to babble about some things, as I am wont to do. All kinds of things on my mind. I had a really good day, or we had a really good day, because we got to see a whole lot of family and friends while taking care of various things having to do with dispersal of stuff of my dad's that we're trying to figure out what goes to where and all that kind of stuff, because we've had a lot of my stuff from our dad's apartment, a lot of stuff from our dad's apartment stored in Deb's and my garage in our other house, our real house. So got to see many people that we like today. We got to see both of my brothers. We got to see our daughter. Of course, we saw both of our sons because they're both living here with us for a while anyway. And we saw our dear friend Teresa. We saw our dear friends Scott and Dina for dinner. So we've had a lot of time today with people we really care about, which is super nice, and I'm very grateful for. During the course of the day, I've been thinking about all kinds of things, and I'm going to just share one of them with you very briefly. Those of you who've heard me talk about world building, which is one of the things, of course, that I do as part of my work as a writer of fantastical fiction, or whatever you want to call it, spec-fic, speculative fiction, anything. I don't care. But one of the things that I do, and I've talked about this when I'm world building, is what I have always referred to as the keyhole effect. I don't know if that's my term or if I picked that up from somebody else, but it basically the theory is that you have a beautifully decorated room in a important location in your work, and what you want to do is you also want to prepare. You can't literally build an entire world, okay? But what you can present to readers, or if it's a film, you can present to an audience, or same thing with a play, whatever. What you can present to them is a look through a keyhole, so they can be in this elaborate room that you have created from scratch. But what you want to do also is have something on the other side of the keyhole, so that when they go up to the door of the room, and they look through it and see what's outside the room, they can actually see something. Now, you only have to build or create a reality that's just big enough to fit outside that keyhole, and because that's all they're seeing is what's on the other side of the keyhole. You might think of it as like those Easter eggs, those big fancy Easter eggs that have a little scene in them when you look into them. But the whole point of the kind of keyhole that I'm talking about is that you're giving the reader the feeling that, yes, everything that's important to you right now is going to happen in this room. But this room is a room in a real world. And beyond this room, there are other things in the world. Now, I'm being very literal when I talk about a keyhole here. The example I'm using is very literal, literally putting something on the other side of the keyhole that the reader can see if they look through it. But what it actually means in practice is any number of ways of creating depth beyond your primary field of interaction with the reader. So one of the ways, for instance, that I do this is with things like bits of folklore that come up, often unexplained in things, but that gives you that impression or that feeling that this world, or whatever it is that you're dealing with, has an entire folkloric history. And like the real world that we know of, that there are many cultures and they all have their folklores and their mythologies. That's another form of keyhole. A bit of a song that refers to something historical, or seems to, or folklorical. A curse where somebody curses by a religious figure or a famous something or other. That's another way that you can do a little keyhole. Now, I was thinking beyond this today. This is something I've talked about before. I think I was just talking about it in Birmingham at the British Fantasy Convention, before I got COVID. But there are other ways to view this in life. One of the things I was just thinking about is the fact that those of you who only know me from these readings probably think these are my glasses. Well, they are my glasses in a sense, but they're my reading glasses, which I never wear during the day unless I'm literally sitting at my typewriter working. The rest of the time, I'm running around in these glasses. I used to not wear glasses at all. I just wore contact lenses, but I've gotten lazy with my old age. And it's just too much trouble sticking the things in every day and taking them out again. And you have to keep buying them. And plus, they also, you have to get a new prescription every year. But anyway, so if you ran into me on the street, in the grocery store, whatever, I would be wearing these glasses. This is what my current glasses are and what they look like. But if you only see me in these productions, these readings here, these are the glasses that I'm wearing. Now, it doesn't matter. It means nothing. They're not that dissimilar anyway. They're similar color. They're just one's more round and the other's more rectangular. But it is also, there's like, if we met on the street, you would have a subtle moment of not quite, why doesn't he look like I expect him to look, and you'd be thinking, oh, is he fatter in real life? Does the camera take off weight, vice versa, whatever it might be, you probably wouldn't even notice it, but at some level you might. And that's the kind of thing that I was thinking about tonight, that we all have these keyhole views of ourselves that we present to the world. So, when you're driving along the road and you see somebody else drive past and you briefly look at them as they go past, you're seeing them for a second and a half and you're forming an impression. In a larger sense, even with people we know quite well, like people you work with or something like that, you're only seeing them through that keyhole of who they are in a work environment. And that may be completely different from the way they act and dress and talk and all kinds of other things. You guys probably know about the term code switching, which is, the way that people adjust their language to their social situation according to what they think will make other people most comfortable with them. You frequently see this in people who, for instance, are, have a more street way of talking when they're with their friends or with their family or whatever. And then when they're in, a business situation or in college or whatever, they may adopt a different way of speaking. You certainly, everybody, it was like a big thing people used to laugh about whenever President Obama would talk like what we conceive, what the cliched version of what a black person speaks like. And, Obama code switched, so he would occasionally fall into what was closer to a street argot in the way that we all do. This is not particular to non-white people, but it is very common because a lot of times in the societies that many of us live in, they have been dominated by white people for a long time. So that becomes the thing that you have to learn. You have to learn how to act and talk that way if you want to get somewhere in that world. So there's code switching. Code switching is another form of keyhole. So anyway, this is just something I was thinking about today. I don't have anywhere I'm going with this, but I'm thinking about it both from the world building point of view, but also from the daily life point of view. How many decisions we make based on looking through a single keyhole about who other people are or what situations are like, what a situational reality is and all kinds of things. Personally, I can't speak for you folks out there, but I don't actually need any ways to make life even more granular. I already have enough of a difficult time making up my mind about things and deciding what's right and wrong. And I'm one of those people that I'm always going like, yeah, but there's the other side of the story, and one of my times I was in therapy, my therapist went, yeah, but maybe you're also just doing this to avoid making decisions. You keep making a scale and adding things on whichever side starts to get lighter until you keep them even. So you can kind of hold back and go, it's not time to make a decision yet. Which is another keyhole that people don't, people only see that part of you when you've actually decided to behave a certain way or decided to do a certain thing or whatever, and they may not know how close you were to being a different way, or doing a different thing, or making another choice, or whatever. So, as I said, I don't personally need to make life and reality any more complicated. It is also already a kaleidoscope to me of different realities and different ways of looking at things, which is very helpful when you're a writer who likes to write books with multiple characters, lots of different viewpoints, and try and sell them all as equally valid, at least to the characters to whom they belong. But it is interesting to think about. So anyway, that was just on my mind. I thought I would share that with you, that thought. And one of these days, I'm going to start putting some of this stuff down as writers' thoughts that people who are interested in writing might be interested in. I don't know. I have no idea what people are interested in. I'm just trying to do what I can do, and as I get older, it becomes simpler and simpler. What I can do and what I want to do, and what I think is important. Life becomes more complicated, but Tadism becomes simpler as I become more and more like, I'm too old to mess around with that. That's too difficult. I'm not going to pretend that anymore. I'm just going to tell people I don't want to do that, or whatever the case may be. Anyway, let me check in before I start reading, since I've been babbling already. Let me check in and see who has checked in with us and with me. I see Suzanne has checked in. I don't know if I'll write my writerly thoughts down for a whole book, Suzanne, but I definitely will, probably somewhere up the line, some of these broadcasts will be more about writing and my experiences writing. Only two, says Wouter. All right. So hello to Wouter. Hello, Katya Florenskaya. A pleasure to see you. It's been too long. I was just thinking about you guys the other day. Christy, hello. Yes, absolutely. Work persona versus real life persona. Absolutely. Mark, hello. Good to see you. A pleasure. Suzanne, I think I already mentioned you, but I say hello too. Let's see who else has left comments before the comments all disappear. So Wouter, I got Holger. Hello, Holger. There's Christina. Hello, Christina. There's Dirk. Hello, Dirk. There's my friend Ivan. Hello, Ivan. Good to see you. We were just talking about you in the car on the way back from Santa Cruz tonight. Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy. Been thinking about you too. Cliff. Hello. Greetings to you and the family, and hope everything is well for you guys. Ron, my dear old Droogie. Good to see you, sir. As always, you are a great reassurance to me to have you aboard. Kristen, hello, Kristen. How are you? Good to see you as always, too. Iris, also a pleasure. Petra, there she is. And speaking of there she is, there's my mother-in-law, Hazel. Hello, sweetie. Actually, for once, your daughter is not asleep. When I last left her, she was watching a long, complicated YouTube archaeology thing on the bent pyramid of Snofru. Deb and I are like Egyptology buffs. I have been for years. My second book after Tailchaser Song that I had already started was actually about 18th Dynasty Egypt, and it never got written. But I'm still fascinated by 18th Dynasty Egypt and Egypt in general, and so is Deb. So we watch a lot of that stuff. But I had to come do this, so I'm gonna have to finish it on my own. So anyway, Hazel, hello. Your daughter is fine, and she had a very nice day today, seeing many friends and family. What else? Who else is here? Chris is here. Hello, Chris. Good to see you. And Nicole, hello. Bonjour. Bonsoir, in my case. No, bon matin, because of course it's morning. And Christy, hello. Good to see you, Christy. It says, and 6 more, which is so frustrating because I can't see who they are. Oh, there's Chenoa. Hello, good to see you. And Isaac, okay, very, very good. All right, so that's at least a couple of the people who have checked in, of the ones I was missing. So for those of the rest of you, please don't take it personally. I can only do what I can do with YouTube. And YouTube is a little hellmouth that, not YouTube, I'm sorry, Facebook. Although you may be watching this on YouTube if you're not watching the live broadcast. Anyway, as I said, at the top of this broadcast or this reading, Witchwood Crown plus additional yammering. And I've done the additional yammering So now I am going to read. So thank you all for joining me, and let's go back to what we were reading. And what we were reading is, of course, the Witchwood Crown. And what is happening is that at this point, they've had the royal family, or at least most of it, is in Rimmersgard, where they have gotten there and in time just to see Isgrimner one last time. Duke Isgrimner, beloved character from the first books, or at least beloved by me. I was always very fond of Isgrimner, who has now, at a good old age, has now passed on. But they got to see him before that happened. And they have had the funeral and all that. And at this point, they are having a get together of most of Simon and Miriamel and their friends and whatnot in Elvritshala Castle, or in the main castle where Isgrimner and his family lived. But the only one missing from this party is, of course, Morgan. Morgan is always in trouble. And Morgan is out with the trolls. And that, of course, in this case, trolls means not Benebik and Siski, but little Snenek and Benebik and Siski's daughter, Kina. And so he doesn't know where they're going. They're leading him somewhere. They've left the castle far behind, and they're trotting around out on the fringes of Elvritsala. So I am going to start with that section, and we will just go from there. So thank you for joining me, and now we continue with the Witchwood Crown. What lay beyond the edge of the city here was not a steep cliff, but rather a descending slope of mostly flat stone, cracked and heaved up in places. Beyond it lay a great misty openness, whose details Morgan could not quite make out, flat and white as a fallow field covered with snow. "What?" he asked, then felt his foot begin to go out from under him. The sheets of rock on which he stood were covered in ice. He did not fall completely over, but saved himself only at the expense of a crack to his knee and scraped palms. "Do not talk with Kina," called Snenek over his shoulder from farther down the slope. The husky young troll was scrambling with surprising ease across the icy surfaces, headed toward the misty white flatness below, and his words were faint in the wind. "Her words, however full of sense, will bring you distraction and tumbling. You must instead be watching your feet." Limping and grumpy, Morgan made his way as carefully as he could down the glassy, treacherous stones. Little Snenek was definitely right about one thing. Using the climbing irons demanded keen attention on such a surface, because the spikes on the bottom of them were small. In most situations, he discovered, it was better to use the longer side spikes to wedge his foot into spaces between stones so he could move slowly and balance himself. Hang on just a second. Let me just fix one thing here. There we go. So he could move slowly and balance himself. Still, even managing after a while to stay consistently upright did not make the journey enjoyable. The worst part was watching little Kina, who stayed behind him all the way, clearly by choice, looking sympathetically at him from the depths of her furry hood each time he fell. She herself had not even donned the iron spikes, but made her way over the icy stones in just her soft boots, like a particularly graceful bear cub. As he neared the bottom of the slope, the silhouettes of the wall towers and the castle rising high against the waning moon, Morgan could finally see that what he had first taken for a vast snowy field was in truth a lake covered in ice, right in the center of the city. He had heard someone mention it, but that was not the same as coming upon such a wide and silent place in the middle of a dark night, accompanied only by trolls. Little Snenek had reached the bottom of the hill long before and sat waiting for them, beaming in pleasure as though he had created the lake himself. "Bridvatten, this water is called. Here the little Gratuvask River bends upon itself, and so was forming this lake. At the center is an ancestor house." "A what?" Morgan peered out toward a small island in the middle of the lake, where a low tower and several other roofs could just be seen through the fog. A few small lights burned in the windows, but otherwise it was only an angular collection of shadows. "Ancestor house?"
Yes, with certainty. A place where your people come together to pray to the ancestors. A church, you mean? Morgan said. Actually, I think it's a monastery. Monastery. Little Snenek sounded it out, repeated it. A good word. In any case, it is here I will show you the main part of my cleverness. Look. He lifted up his foot. Morgan could see nothing of interest. For sliding on ice, the troll said, waggling his leg. The crescent moon gave just enough light for Morgan to see that something like a knife's blade had replaced the climbing spikes on the bottom of the troll's sheepskin boots. Ice skates? Asked the prince, mildly nettled. That's nothing new. People here skate on ice all the time. We even do it down in Erkenland. Snenek shook his head. You are not seeing the beauty of what I have crafted. Here, sit down. Give me your foot. Morgan grunted in a put-upon way, but sat on a slippery stone and raised his leg. Little Snenek... Oops, I lost it here. Little Snenek scrambled over and began... Let me start that sentence again, or those sentences. Morgan grunted in a put-upon way, but sat on a slippery stone and raised his leg. Little Snenek scrambled over and began pulling on Morgan's side spikes. After a moment, and a clicking and clunking that tickled the bottom of Morgan's foot even through his boot, the troll lifted his hands. Do you see? With my idea, the climbing irons can be taken away and turned around, as so. And when they are again rightly affixed, they are blades for ice sliding. Ice skating. But Morgan could not help being impressed. In a matter of moments, the troll had changed the shoe spikes into the blade of a skate. As he watched Snenek do the same with his other foot, he suddenly realized what this meant. Do you mean we are going to skate here? On this lake? Snenek almost chortled. Do not worry. I am sure the churchmen in that ancestor house will not mind. Morgan had a feeling that the troll didn't know many Adenite priests. But I've never skated. Kina finally appeared. For some reason, the female troll had stopped and retreated back up the slope, and now she was dragging a heavy branch, much longer than she was. Not to fear, Morgan Prince, said Snenek. I will teach you. I am a rare teacher. I have taught Kina many things. Many, yes, she said, settling herself and her long branch on a stone near the edge of the lake. So I do not slide on ice tonight. I sit here. If you fall into cold wet, Prince Highness, she patted the heavy branch, this for you to pull out. If Kina herself did not want to get on the ice, Morgan wanted to, even less. His grandfather and grandmother had told him many frightsome stories of how treacherous ice and snow could be in the far north. But Snenek was already hurrying him out onto the glassy surface of the lake. Now, do as I am doing. Your knees must be bending. Morgan did his best, but each time his feet went out from under him and he fell, he could swear he heard the ice fracturing beneath him. It was hard fully to appreciate the wonder of skating on an ice-mantled moonlit lake when all he could think about was the freezing black water that lurked beneath the ice. Oh, poor luck, Snenek said for perhaps the fourth or fifth time, so cheerful that Morgan wanted to kick him, but he had to concentrate instead on getting back up without falling over again. Do not fear to fall, Morgan Prince. That way true learning is found. And that is why our creators gave to us hindquarters of flesh and protecting fat. Do wolves have such fundaments? Do sheep? No, only people who learn by each tumble. Morgan wished he had gone to the Kopstade with the others, even if their evening had ended in a brawl. By now he could have been comfortably drunk, and even being pummeled by angry rimmersmen would surely be less painful than Snenek's ice sliding. By the good God, I think I've broken my knee and my arse at the same time. How is that even possible? Do not fear, Morgan Prince. You are doing well for a first try. At least the troll was enjoying himself. Yes, wave your arms so, around and around, to keep from falling. Try to slide here to me, farther out. Of course, I am knowing your knee pains you, but do you see, such a good teacher I am, that you are already learning. Soon you will be ice sliding like the most nimble Canuck. But I keep the long stick here, Kina assured Morgan in a voice too low for Snenek to hear. Just for careful. Next section. The conversation had ranged widely over both past and present, from dragon fighting to cow breeding. As part of the estate at Engby, Isgrimner had given Sludig and his wife several hundred head of long-bodied, short-legged northern cattle, and the creatures had become Sludig's obsession. You would never credit it, he kept saying, but in their way, they are as interesting as people. I suspect that may have more to do with the people you meet than the cows you raise, Baron, Tiamak said, which made everyone laugh. But Sludig did not reply for some moments. To speak honestly, it is not the people in Engby who worry us, he said at last. Remember, husband, this is a happy gathering, said Alva. For Simon, the pleasant haze of beer and company dispersed a bit. Based on the looks Sludig and his wife shared now, he had not been mistaken. Something deeper and darker was disturbing them. What do you mean? Asked Simon. Not people. Sludig shook his head. Truly, let us talk of something else. Majesty, let us talk of your grandchildren. I hear Morgan is man-sized now. I would like to see him. I would like to see him, too. Simon frowned. At least now and then. He knew he was being led away from something, and he didn't like it. Tell me what it is that worries you, Sludig. Nothing for your majesties to fret yourself with. The north is always strange. Perhaps a bit stranger this winter, that's all. Is it about the white foxes? Husband, said Miriamel in a tone Simon knew all too well, Sludig does not want to speak about it right now. Begging your pardon, but the queen is right, Sludig said. Not when all are drinking good wine and ale and sharing tales of old times. But while you are still here in the Northlands, we should speak of these other things. And we will. They returned to other stories, other subjects, but the mood had changed, and Simon, for one, could not summon back his earlier carelessness. This is the cruel trick of being a king, he said at last to Benebek. You can have anything you want, but you spend all your time worrying. That, I am fearing, is not just true for monarchs, but for most who live long enough to become grown men and women. He smiled. What is your worrying now, friend Simon? Is it what Sludig is saying, or is it still the silence from the city that troubles you, as you were telling to me before? Mary had come to stand behind him for a moment. Simon could feel her cool hand on the back of his neck. The silence from the city is something that worries us both, she said, but it troubles Simon the most. It should trouble everybody. Simon thought he sounded loud, so he tried again in a softer voice. We haven't heard a word from them in several years. How strange that is being. Benebek shook his head. Not even words from Jiriki or Aditu. They have sent no messengers? Simon shrugged. Nothing. And we have sent them many messages, or at least tried. Perhaps it's their mother, Likimea, who wants it this way. She was never very happy with us. Was she, Eolair? The Count, who had fallen out of the other conversation, started. Certainly, Likimea was not friendly to us in the way Jiriki and his sister were, he said at last. But after meeting her, I would not say she hated mortals either. Cautious is the way I would put it. And after what her people have gone through at mortal hands, who could say she's wrong? Simon made a sour face. Spoken like the diplomat you are, carefully generous to all sides. But what do you truly think? Eolair shrugged. He looked uncomfortable. It is not entirely fair to ask me to shed the habits of a lifetime in a matter of moments, Majesty. But I suspect there may be something at work we do not know, some argument among the Scythi themselves. I cannot see any reason for such a silence otherwise. Miriamel nodded. I think you may be right, Eolair, and from what Simon has said about his months with them, they also seem to keep time differently than we do. Still, it is strange this so long silence, Benedict said, but then noticed his daughter Kina, who had appeared as if from nowhere and stood silently in the chamber doorway. He beckoned her to him, and they had a murmured conversation. Then she nodded shyly to the others and went out again, quick and quiet as a mouse. The young ones are back from their adventuring, Benedict said. Morgan the prince is tired and sore, Kina says, so he is going early to bed. Miriamel looked worried. Is he unwell? Benedict smiled. A mere tumble of small nature, Kina says. Bumped and bruised a little and shamed because of it, but otherwise without harm. He is in good hands with my daughter and her Nukapik, who studies the healing arts. I do believe they are all becoming friends. The queen looked uncertain, but Simon sidled over to her. The boy's fine. They went out for a walk. He had a little fall. Probably had too much to drink. Don't embarrass him by rushing off to look in on him. The trolls will take good care of him. She did not seem entirely convinced, but she sighed and let herself be guided back to a chair by Siski. Soon the conversation turned back to the Scythi. We Canuck have not been much meeting with the Zidaya, the Scythi folk, as you are calling them, in recent years, said Benedict. But we have also been seeing no great change in their dealings with us. Do you agree, Siski, my wife? She nodded emphatically. The other conversations had now ended, and all by the fire were turned toward each other. Many Scythi coming to Blue Mud Lake only 3 summers gone, she said. They giving us news of many things and sharing meals with us then. They sang. Simon could hear the change in her voice as she remembered. At night beneath all stars. It had so much beauty. But nothing was said by them of silence between the Zidaya and their friends in the Hayholt, Benedict added, a frown creasing his brow. Still, these were ordinary. These were being ordinary Scythi. I mean not of the family of year dancing, that we are knowing best. Aditu and Jiriki and their kin. All we can do is be patient, I suppose, Simon said. We have sent them many messages. One day, perhaps, they will answer. But he could not keep the deep sadness out of his voice. Once he had held out great hope that the Scythi and mortal men could be reconciled, but it had been many years since a better friendship between their peoples had seemed anything but a foolish, idle dream. He stared at the fire, watching the flames and thinking of his last terrible night in Jawe Tinukai with Jiriki and the rest, the night the Norns had attacked their Scythi kin, the night Amarasu's shipborne had died. The others were thinking their own thoughts. For long moments the room was silent but for the crackling of the fire. At last the king turned to Sludig. "I'm sorry I've made a muddle of the festive mood, old friend. But now you might as well tell me what you've heard of the Norns. Is it just rumor or something more? The North is always full of tales that the white foxes are coming again, that I know. That hasn't changed since the day of the Storm King's War. Grimbrand said there were many stories this winter, but he did not think it was so much different from other years." "Simon, don't," said Miriam Owl. "You agreed." Sludig shook his head. "Perhaps your husband is right, Majesty, and perhaps things are different here in Elvitsala. It is a large, well-guarded city. Engby, where we live, is farther north, closer to the Nornfels. But I should let my wife tell the story, since it is hers." They turned to Alva. "What story?" the queen asked. Alva looked a little surprised. "I had not expected to. It will seem foolish, or at least parts of it will." Several of the others urged her to speak. "Very well," she said finally, "but it seems a poor way to end an evening of good fellowship." She turned to Sludig. "Send the squire back to our chambers for it, will you, my husband?" Sludig called for a young man who had been waiting outside in the hall's antechamber. The young man bowed as he was given his quiet orders, but he was struggling to keep something else from his face. Distaste or even fear, Simon thought. "What is this mystery?" he asked. "I beg your Majesty's patience," Lady Alva said. "All will be revealed soon enough. But here's what I must tell you first. Elvitsala, Kaldskreik, Segard, all these places are much like Urchester, cities with towns and villages all around. If you stand upon almost any road nearby, within an hour you will hear a farmer's cart, or the sound of hoofs as a royal messenger rides past, or glimpse hunters or charcoal burners making their way through the nearby woods. But in Engby, where I grew up and where Sludig and I now live, if you walk away from the houses, you can continue on for days without seeing another living human soul. Some of the older roads will not see a traveler for a year or more. But that does not mean that you will be alone. In the north, we have always known that the land of the white foxes, the Norns, is close to our borders. There is a valley just beyond ours to the northeast that has been called the Refaslod, the Fox's Road, as long as anyone can remember, going back to my great-grandmother's day, because the Norns have always used it. "Hold a moment, please, Countess," Tiamak said, his usual shyness pushed aside by his curiosity. "Engby, your home is far east of where we sit, here in Elvitsala, east even of Kaldskreik, is it not? Why would Norns travel so far in that direction? Nothing lies to the east of the Dimmerskog forest except snow and emptiness." "I am not meaning to take offense where I am suspecting none was meant," said Benebek a bit sternly. "But by nothing, I hope you are not speaking of Yikanuk, land of our people?" Tiamak was dismayed. "Forgive me, no, of course not, Benebek. But in the mountains of Yikanuk are far away many, many leagues, and I have not heard of Norns being seen in the Trollfells." "They are not," Benebek admitted, "not since the most ancient of days, before great Tumetai vanished in the ice." "That truly is puzzling," said Eolair. "The two ways the Norns have always traveled to the south, at least when mustered for war, are down the old northern road in the shadow of the western mountains, or down the wide Frost March road that leads past this city and through the eastern heart of Rimmersgard on the way south. Simon was a bit dazzled. All this map reading and such, I don't understand. Miriamel, does this make any sense to you? A little, I think, she said, but I am still waiting to hear Alva's story. And me, said Simon. It's only that I've had too much to drink for patience. Go ahead, Lady Alva, please. I hope you will be patient enough for this, she told them, because I must tell you of a dream I had when I was a girl. Tell then, Simon said. I have had many dreams myself that turned out to be true. Then we have that in common, Alva said. I have always had dreams of things that later come to pass. Small matters, mostly. Things that are lost, visitors unlooked for, messages from those who have passed on that make sense only to those who knew them. It is true, said Sludig. All in Engby know of Lady Alva's dreams. Once, when I was but a girl, she went on, I dreamed that Saint Helvard himself came to me, dressed in robes of white, as I had seen him portrayed on the walls of our church. He led me out of my parents' house and through the snows. In the dream there was a great storm, but I could hear other voices in the wind, singing and laughing. They were beautiful, but also frightening, and somehow I knew I was hearing the white foxes, the ice demons I had been taught to fear since I was old enough to understand. In the dream, Helvard led me up a hill and across its crest to the far side, so that I could look down and see the Refaslod laid out before me. A ghostly army walked it, barely visible through the hard-blown snow, but what I could make out was spiky, with spears and banners. In truth, all I could see clearly were their eyes glowing like the eyes of beasts, and they were beyond counting. They marched to a city that never was, the saint told me. They seek to win everything that is nothing. And then I woke up, shivering in my bed. Simon was shaking his head. I don't understand, he said at last. You say this dream came to you when you were a girl? I used to have many strange dreams, Alva said, but no other like that one. Why do you look so puzzled, husband? Miriamel asked. The wise woman Jaloi used to say I was closer to the road of dreams than many people, Miri, but I don't. Of late, I haven't. Simon paused. I've just realized something. I've stopped dreaming. What? The Queen was not the only one who stared at him as though he had begun babbling nonsense. It's true. I only realized it now. I can't remember the last time I dreamed. It's been days. No, weeks. Simon turned back to the Baroness. Lady Alva, I apologize for being distracted. I will try to make sense of it later. But I still do not understand. You said this dream came to you when you were a child. Why do you tell us now? He looked from her to Sludig. Am I misunderstanding? No, Majesty, said Alva, because I have not finished. We were going to wait and tell you this later, but it seems the moment is now. She gave a little shrug. Here is the rest. I have remembered that dream of Saint Helvard all my life, with no sign of it ever coming true. In truth, the Norns seem to have entirely stopped using the Refaslod they had travelled for generations. But just in the last few years, such stories have begun to be told again. People are once again seeing strange things around and on the ancient fairy road. Then, scarcely a month before Sludig and I came to Elfridshala, one snowy night several dozen cattle escaped from one of our barns. My good husband took several men and went in search of them. Nearly half the cows were found wandering, but the others had simply vanished. I started back with some of the men, Sludig said, leading back such cattle as we had found. My foreman, my wife, and several of our men stayed behind, searching for stragglers. He nodded to his wife. Now you speak, Alva. Sludig's squire re-entered the chamber, but stood patiently waiting, while his master and mistress continued their story. Simon could see the young man was carrying a bundle of cloth, handling it with the exaggerated diffidence of someone tasked to bear something foul-smelling or foul-feeling. It does not matter who tells the tale. The end is the same, said Lady Alva. We could ill afford to lose so many cattle, so we searched long after we should have gone back. As twilight fell, we came upon a group of strangers at the far eastern edge of our lands. It was snowing and hard to see well, but at first it seemed as though they were all sleeping. An odd thing to be doing in a snowstorm, you will agree. But when we got closer, we saw that they were all dead, several of them besmeared in blood. More surprisingly, though, they were not men. Norns? Asked Simon. Were they white foxes? Yes, but not all of them. Some of the dead were equally strange in face and form, but golden-skinned. Golden? Simon looked at Miri, then at Benebek. You mean they were Scythi? Perhaps, but I cannot say it certainly, since I had never seen any of the fair ones before, Lady Alva told him. But your husband has. He most definitely has, said Simon. What were they, Sludig? I never saw the bodies, Majesty. My wife and the men hurried back to fetch me, but when we went back to where they had found the dead, they were all gone. Gone? Someone had come while we went to fetch the rest of the men, explained Lady Alva. They had carried away all the bodies and brushed away most of the tracks. But they had not had time to remove all traces. Blood could still be seen in the snow, and something else as well, half covered in the drifts. She turned to Sludig. You show them, husband, Alva said. I cannot bear to hold it myself. Sludig took the bundle from his squire and unfolded the thick cloth. This is what we found. What he held out was a dagger of strange design, with a faint coppery sheen, its hilt made from a single piece of polished stone. At the top, just below the pommel, was a thin ring of what Simon at first thought was another kind of stone, shiny and gray. Then he saw that the gray stone had a grain. God's bloody tree, he swore, pointing at the gray stuff with a trembling finger. Is that Witchwood? A bronze Nakiga dagger? That is being, said Benebek, peering at it. And, yes, the decoration is Witchwood. The Aidenites all made the sign of the tree. Siski touched her hand to her heart, as did her husband. I know what that marking on the Witchwood signifies, said Tiamak. Do you see it carved there? He was obviously reluctant to touch the dagger, and only pointed at the ring of gray stone below the pommel and the tiny spiral rune carved there. I have seen it in old books. It identifies the Order of Song, the Norn queen's chief sorcerers. Simon stared at the knife. It was such a small, simple thing, but he felt cold and heavy in his chest, as if a stone hung there instead of a warm beating heart. He had not felt an apprehension like this since John Joshua's death. He turned to Miriamel, but his wife had gone very pale. So, not just Norn warriors, but Norn wizards too, Simon said, and fighting against the Scythi? Are the white foxes going to war with their kin again? If so, all the immortals seem to be keeping it a secret from us. But fear not, friends. If our enemies are up to something again, we will remind them of what happened last time. He spoke with a certainty that he was nowhere close to feeling. He had hoped that a few of his companions might chime in with similar boasts, or at least a few brave, reassuring words, but the room had gone silent, but for the crackling of the fire. Chapter 14, Ghosts of the Garden. Nezeru, come and kneel before me. It was the first time Mako had spoken to her since the Ringlight's captain had returned them to the mainland shore, then hurriedly cast off again, clearly happy to have survived with his ship and crew intact. She walked across the rough camp the Queen's talons had made on the bluff above the ocean. For once, Saomeji did not even look up to see her pass, too fascinated by the sacred bones in his care, which he had been examining for hours, like a jeweler who had found a cache of gems from the lost garden. Nezeru stopped and stood before Mako, but did not meet his eye. I said kneel. The hand chieftain reached out and shoved her down. She hung her head and waited for what would come next, trying not to imagine. Useless speculation gives power to fear, her father had always said, and although Vieki might not know much about her life as a sacrifice, the Magister understood the need to confront power with a clear head. But although Nezeru knew her father's advice was good, she could not stop her heart from speeding or her skin from prickling. The order of sacrifice was no stranger to battlefield executions, and her crime had been one of the most terrible. Sacrifice Nezeru Setenduya. After being given a clear order, you failed the mother of all, said Mako. Because of that, the members of this hand were forced to fight for their lives. Our mission for the Queen might have been compromised or even defeated. Useful Hikidaya warriors might have been killed through your fault. Do you deny it? How could she? No, Hand Chieftain, my crime is great. Do you have any explanation? That she had decided at the last moment she could not kill a defenseless mortal child? How could that be an explanation? She might as well say she had simply gone mad. No, Master. The sacred ghosts of the garden hear you. It is they who judge you, not me. Now, look up. Mako waited until she lifted her eyes. Do you know what I am holding? All other activity in the camp, even Saomeji's study of the sacred bones, had stopped. Nezeru felt a chill all over her body. That is your sword, Cold Root. So it was to be death. She would do her best to take it bravely, as befitted one of the Queen's sacrifices, but she grieved at what it would do to her father's pride and position, let alone to her mother, Tsoja, who would be devastated. Nezeru did not weep, though. Sacrifices did not shed tears from pain or fear. No matter her crime, she would go to her end, still loyal in that way, at least. Mako turned the heavy sword over. A bone grip protruded from the leather on the back of the scabbard, just beneath the hilt. He pulled on it, and a long, thin branch of witchwood slid free of its own small sheath. Mako held it close to her face. "And do you know what this is?" Nezeru shuddered. She had been ready for death, or at least as ready as she could be, consoling herself with the idea that it would at least be swift. "That is the Hebikai and Chieftain Mako, the serpent." Mako waved the long, flexible branch in the air, watched it dance against a gray sky of almost the same color. "Yes, the serpent. And for your crime, you are sentenced to feel its bite. Keme, come here and strip this sacrifice." Keme was beside her in an instant. He yanked at her jerkin, barely bothering to undo the straps. Within a few moments, Nezeru was naked to the waist. At Mako's nod, Keme grabbed her arms and dragged her swiftly to a pine tree at the edge of the campsite. He set her face against it, then grabbed her arms and held them from the other side so that she could not move. The rough bark scraped her breasts and cheek. She could not see Mako, but she could hear him walking back and forth behind her. Keme was carefully keeping his face empty of any expression, but she could tell by how tightly he held her wrists that some part of him relished this duty. "I could take your life," Mako said, "but apparently your gifts are unusual, and both the Queen and the High Magister of Sacrifice gave permission for you to join our hand, so I will spare you for the judgment of my superiors. But you have endangered our most sacred mission, and that cannot go unpunished. The snake shall strike 20 times. 20 times. Nezeru's legs became shamefully weak, and her knees suddenly could not hold her. Had it not been for Keme's powerful grip, she would have slumped to the ground. Even a dozen strokes of the Hebikai could kill. "If you are truly of the blood that makes a queen's sacrifice, you will walk beside us tomorrow morning when we ride out for Nakiga," Mako said. "If not, we will leave you to die. The bones of great Hakatri are more important than any one of us." As she held tightly, Keme. "Aye. Then let the serpent bite." Nezeru heard his footsteps getting closer. Suddenly overcome with an animal terror she had never felt before, she struggled, but Keme was too strong. The tree trunk must be scratching her nipples until they bled, she knew, but in her fear she hardly felt it. "Hold steady, Sacrifice," Mako hissed. "Show courage." She gained a little control of herself and managed to stop squirming. "You owe the Queen your body," Mako intoned, and then the first blow of the Hebikai fell. She only dimly heard the loud crack it made, because a bolt of fiery pain leaped through her entire back. Nezeru writhed in agony and almost cried out, but she was afraid to open her mouth, afraid she would vomit with her face pressed against the tree. The pain, which had at first seemed so fierce it would stop her heart, only grew worse as the moments passed. "You owe the Queen your heart," said Mako, and struck again. Stars seemed to burst and die inside her head, and her bones felt as if they would snap. So hard did she try to push forward, away from the lash. But Mako only waited a few moments, then calmly continued. "You owe the Queen your spirit." The serpent bit her again, another poison wound, deep and foul. She had never felt pain like this, not even in the worst days of her training, the fire ordeal, or the ice ordeal, or the Hall of Spears. She tried to suck air into her body, but it would not come. She couldn't see. Everything was red mist. "You owe the Queen your life." Again and again Mako struck, and each time Nezeru thought she could take no more. that the next blow would separate her shrieking spirit from her agonized flesh forever. Somewhere, near the end, a great darkness bloomed in her head like one of the holy black flowers of Nakiga's meadows, filling everything, bringing silence, bringing blackness. And I'm going to leave it there since it's 2:00. Not the most cheerful, not the most cheerful bit to stop on, but it seems like the right place to stop. So that's where I'm going to stop. So again, apologies for leaving you in such an unpleasant part. But there you go. You know, I never know before I start how long and where I'm going to wind up ending. So we just kind of have to play it by ear. Anyway, okay, so let me get rid of that. So there we are. That's what we're doing. Tomorrow night, or tonight, later, I always do that every time. It's not tomorrow. It's just, to me, it seems like it is. Tonight at 7 p.m., I will be reading the next segment, which is more about Nezaru and the rest of the Norns, the Hikedaya, and what happens to them, and who shows up when whatever that happens to them is happening to them. At least as I recall, that's what happens next. So, but it's a long section, so I don't even want to start into that. So anyway, all I really want to say at this point is thank you for joining me. It's always a huge pleasure to have you with me. And continue to take care of your own self, your mental, spiritual, emotional, physical health, and that of your loved ones. Help with that too whenever you can. And anybody else around you that looks like they need a little something, if you've got it to give it to them. You know, even if that's just a hello or a friendly smile. Sometimes that makes a big difference, honestly. It really does. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I have to say. That's the totality of my homespun wisdom for the night. So with that, I thank you all once again for joining me. And I will see you very soon, one way or the other. So be good, take care, stay safe, and peace.